RSI is one of the most common metrics that people use when they're trying to measure a tendon's efficiency in terms of stretching and shortening and getting energy out of it. This equation is typically defined as the flight time of the plyometric divided by the contact time. The problem with this is that it doesn't account for the drop height. So if you fall off a 10 centimeter box versus an 80 centimeter box and you get an RSI measure, it's irrespective of the box that you dropped off of. So it really only tells you part of the equation. It doesn't tell you how well you yield from different heights. What's up, guys? My name is John Evans. I'm the coach of the highest jumper in the world. This is Isaiah Rivera. He has a 50.5 inch vertical, and I've been coaching him since 2019. I myself have a 41 inch vertical, and I've coached probably 50 to 100 athletes to improve their vertical from 50 into the high 40s, as well as helping
from 50 into the high 40s.
Sorry, from 40s into the from 40 into the high 40s.
You suck as a coach.
Yeah, I suck as a coach. I make people worse. And I've also worked with athletes, improving them from 30s into the 40s. Probably 1,000 of those athletes. That said, you think so?
Yeah.
All right.
And
we need actual numbers.
Then you take into account our free.
Oh yeah, that's the 50,000 people.
It's definitely in the tens of thousands.
Okay, tens of thousands. I'll say that.
We literally just helped the guy increase
8 inches in
4 months.
In 4 months,
Yeah.
2 inches a month. That's insane. Anyways, guys, this podcast is brought to you by THPstrength, the premier jump coaching service if you're looking to get more athletic, get healthy, and be a better athlete. If you're looking to sign up, go to THPstrength.com and use discount code THP for 10% off your first month. That said, we're going to get into it. Isaiah, this concept is fairly new to you. Do you know anything about this new concept, NRSI, other than what I just told you in the first 30 seconds of before this?
I know what RSI is. I don't know what NRSI is.
Okay, so RSI, for those of you who don't know, like I said, is the flight time, or sometimes people use drop height in, I think, millimeters. Is that what they do? Yeah. Drop height in, or no, it's like meters. Jump height. They use like height. Oh, it's jump height over the contact time. That's like, there's two different ways to get the metric. But this is my whiteboard here. So RSI stands for reactive strength index. Now, this has become really popular in the last, I would say, maybe like 10 years or so. Do you agree with that? Maybe even more, 12, 15 years. And really, it's a metric for an athlete's reactivity, meaning like when they hit the ground and they jump or deflect off of it, how high do they jump? Now, this is not a perfect metric. It's not even really a metric. It's an index. So, you're looking at two metrics, dividing them, and it gives you an arbitrary number that you're using to indicate, an athlete's improvement. Now, when I've looked at RSI and I've considered the drop heights, I've always known that when I fall off a higher box, I have a longer ground contact time. That ground contact time is going to lower my RSI. So we're just going to use one of the equations, which is flight time, because I think it's probably easier. So it's really the flight time of the jump, so we'll call that FT, over the contact time. So Isaiah, we look at his jump RSI all the time. And you can usually look at this relative to either a simultaneous contact of your feet hitting the ground and then taking off simultaneously, or a unilateral jump. In his case, I've actually used it for an asymmetric bilateral takeoff because the plant foot hits first and then the block foot hits. That is really unconventional. Most people don't do that. They will usually look at it just in terms of depth jumps, sometimes single leg depth jumps, but usually just depth jumps. And that was kind of the way that it was developed, was considering that as the only variable. Over time, I was curious, okay, how does, I thought the metric was relevant overall because it was like, okay, I'm just going to look at this RSI relative to a specific task. And so what a friend of mine, Matt Watson, and then Thomas Kortenbeck, someone that I highly respect, one of the best jump coaches I've ever met in terms of high jump, they basically came up with a new metric, which was NRSI. So in the past, I would just use RSI relative to a skill, which I was kind of correcting for what they did, but they found a more clear, concise way to do it. So if I was looking at Isaiah's jump, he spends, let's say, 270 milliseconds on the ground. So we know that it's 0.270, and his flight time, the highest he's ever hit, was 0.97. 98 what? 1?
98.2, I think.
9. Oh my gosh.
And I think that was like 268 or something like that.
On the jump?
Yeah.
It's funny that you have that memorized. So the thing is with this is you have to look at the configuration when you land because you're looking at the flight time. So if you land in a really bent knee position, you're going to get an elevated or inflated value on RSI. So if you're landing like with your knees bent versus completely straight, and we see this also when we're looking at flight times on a jump mat, which is a big issue, that value is going to change drastically. So that said, I like it task by task because if Isaiah is jumping as hard as he can on a height check or a one-hander, and I'm always comparing the same.
Specifically vertex.
Yeah, like if I'm comparing a vertex jump
like
to a
this.
vertex jump, it's always the same landing and it's a very similar takeoff every single time. So I get a very consistent metric. Now I could look at the contact time of the plant foot, I could look at the block foot, and that would tell me respectively what each of those have in terms of an RSI. So right now we're actually looking specifically at the both feet, but we're looking from touchdown of the plant foot. So it's kind of biased, but again, I always do it relative to the task at hand. So a full approach, bilateral takeoff. You said it was 268?
Yeah.
All right, so what this does is it tells us that when Isaiah does a full approach jump and he launches himself into the plant at, let's say, 2 meters per second, or no, it'd be more than that, probably like 5 meters per second, and plants both his feet, gets on and off the ground in 0.68 seconds, and he jumps, he's in the air for almost an entire second, we get an RSI value. That RSI value is 3.66. So this would be the RSI of Isaiah in this specific scenario. Now this is a 2-foot bilateral jump. Again, the plant foot would have the same RSI, so we know that he's fairly reactive on a 2-foot jump. However, 1-foot jumps, you would see this value increase drastically. So now let's do the same jump, but let's say it was a 1-foot jump, right? And we'll do a hypothetical one, but it'll probably be somewhat accurate. So let's say it's a 50-inch jump from a high jumper. Let's say they did a vertec like Ilya Ivanchuk. His flight time, his ground contact time, because I've studied it, is about 170 to 180 milliseconds. So now this changes.
You know what's weird about you saying that is that I made a Quizlet, a training Quizlet, and they said elite high jumpers. It's that exact one, 0.17 to 0.18. That's what it says in my thing.
Got it. All right, so go ahead, do that number now. So this is an elite high jumper with the same jump height. This is his reactiveness according to RSI. But again, it's a different task, so it's task specific because he has a different velocity coming in. He has a different negative vertical velocity. He doesn't bend his knee as much, so he's going to have higher reactivity. And we get 5.6. Pretty freaking ridiculous. And you know, some guys, when they tend to drop this value for the contact time, like I've seen guys hit like 130 milliseconds here and like 750 here, you know, their reactivity will shoot up. Like Janet Clausen, if you guys know who that is, his reactivity is crazy high. And it's a good metric for sprinters, especially if you're looking at like a stiffness hop. But the big problem was that, again, it's task specific. So if I, you know, squat down a lot, I'm gonna have a low reactivity, right? And so that's the big issue with it. I like to look at it like I would call it TRSI or TS RSI, which would be like task specific RSI. So it's only according to that task. And you have to have a pretty good coaching eye. Like if I see someone doing a, you know, let's say it's a depth jump, but Isaiah does it and Janet Clausen does it, both amazing jumpers in different ways. Isaiah's gonna flex his knee more, he's gonna have higher ground contact time. Now I could tell him, get a really short ground contact time, like as short as possible, and bias the number up accordingly, and this number will start to shoot up. And you'll also have slightly different muscle tendon mechanics as a result. Like typically what I've noticed is when you have the shorter ground contact time, the movement has to go towards more ankle dominant. You're not gonna have a knee dominant movement because when you flex your knee and your hip, it takes a lot of time. You can't get off the ground if you land in a quarter squat, bending your knee and the ankle a lot, right? Or relatively a lot compared to just your ankle angulating, or your knee angulating like 10 degrees as opposed to 50. That's gonna take more time, even if you're going as fast as you can. The tendon might stretch in both examples, but it's gonna shift to a more ankle dominant movement as this ground contact time goes down. Where's my eraser?
I have no idea.
Hit me with the eraser, my boy, my dear Watson. It's okay, I'll use my hand.
It's right here.
I won't use my hand. I like this black marker. Big fan. All right, so now what has happened is to kind of deal with this issue, coaches have developed something called NRSI. And I don't know what the N means, maybe new RSI, negative RSI, I don't know. But they basically wanted to say, you know, when we're looking at these jumps, we're only measuring the flight time of the propulsive phase, right? So as we push up, we're only looking at the time that we're in the air. So it's just like, we're assuming that the whole time on the ground, you're generating force positively, that it's lifting you into space. And we're also not really looking at the negative vertical velocity, meaning how hard did you hit the ground. So if I jump off an 80 centimeter box versus a 10 centimeter box, I could have the same RSI hypothetically. I get them very different ways, but that's because I only care about two things, the ground contact time and the jump height. But those are completely different metrics or physiological loads on the body. Okay, so that's the biggest issue. I'm going to say that again. The biggest issue with regular RSI is you get the same number, but have completely different physiological loads. That's why I like it to be task specific, but this is also another way to do it. If you jump off an 80 centimeter box and you get the same RSI versus a 10 centimeter box, that tells me that the athlete that jumped from 80 is way better at handling high eccentric forces, very, very high. You could even call it quasi-isometric if they're getting the tendon to stretch, like in a previous video that we talked about that biomechanical movement. I don't know what you call it. So yeah, this is a good new metric. And so basically what they did is they said, you know what, let's actually take the flight time that you fall off the box and we'll divide that by 2. So you would take, let's call it fall time. Divide that by 2, so we cut it in half. And then we're going to add the, what was the other one? Was it jump height? Is that the other one?
I haven't seen it.
That was it. So then it's flight time. And it's an index, so it doesn't really matter as long as it's consistent. And it does a decent job of telling you what you want to know. And then we're going to divide that by the contact time. And I'm going to double check on that I got that right. Isaiah, can you grab my phone for me? One memento. And let us double check that I did not mess up their new fancy metric.
Can you
So,
put this in parentheses?
here,
Just
take
to
this marker,
appease
my boy.
To appease
My
my
dear Watson.
math nerd side.
Yes, so, yep, ingoing flight time divided by 2 plus outgoing flight time divided by 2 over the contact time. So if we have a fall time, let's say Isaiah steps off a 10 centimeter box, he's probably going to be in the air a very short period of time. If he falls off an 80 centimeter box, he's going to be in the air a long time. Now, I don't have those exact metrics because off the top of my head, I just don't know those numbers. But we might be able to find one. Oh, actually, we
Wait,
can do
which
this for your
numbers?
2-foot. We can do this for your 2-foot takeoff.
What number was it that you needed?
We need the flight time of your penultimate step.
Okay, I got you.
You got you?
Yeah.
You got this? So Isaiah's going to give us these numbers. So we're going to look at, we'll call it the fall time, i.e. the amount of time he's falling or the distance he's falling from. And this is an indicator of his negative vertical velocity because the more you're in the air, gravity functions, to accelerate you downward. And so your mass has a velocity when it hits the ground and you have to overcome that velocity and then push upwards. So if you overcome more velocity, you are stronger eccentrically, therefore you can accelerate off the ground when someone throws you or darts you or torpedoes you into the floor. The better you do that, typically the higher you'll jump if you have really, really efficient tendons. So Isaiah is going to give us some values here, and I will pause it right now while he does that. All right, welcome back. We have gotten our numbers, right? So we have a fall time, i.e. from when he toe off the penultimate step to touchdown of his plant foot was 0.158 seconds. Flight time of the jump was 0.980, which is actually the highest flight time he has ever had in his entire life. And lastly, we have the contact time of the jump, which was 0.267 seconds. So his regular RSI, when we just looked at the flight time over the contact time, was 3.66. Now we're going to plug and chug, right? So we're going to take the fall time, which is Isaiah, you can do this math.
0.079.
We took the fall time, divided it by 2?
Yeah.
So we have 0.079 plus
0.49.
0.49,
Yep. That value is
which equals
0.569.
So on the top, or the numerator, we have 0.569, and we are going to divide that by, we can do this,
0.267.
0.267, 0.267. I know that's probably written kind of small, but I'm getting close to the ground now.
Which gives you 2.13.
2.13. So, what does this mean? That means Isaiah does not handle nearly as much negative vertical velocity as a high jumper or a long jumper? Probably. We don't actually, they might not handle any. The goal is to handle none because they're running in and they have a vertical velocity, and that maybe is the caveat for this specific metric that I don't like, that I just realized. This does not take into consideration horizontal velocity. It only takes into consideration vertical velocity. So if you're going to look at, this would only work if you're going to be looking at plyos that are vertically oriented. As soon as you add in a horizontal component, it goes out the window, which means I kind of like my task-specific RSI a little bit better. But
you could even do task-specific.
You could do
RSI,
task-specific,
but
yeah.
you're
You could do
essentially getting the
task-specific.
same.
You get TN RSI, but it would be the same number.
Because
So
you
yeah.
really just want to see if it's not even you want, it's you're seeing if you're becoming more elastic or less elastic, and then how high you're jumping.
You're seeing how you handle higher negative vertical velocities.
Because something that was really interesting.
And the goal in high jump is to minimize negative vertical velocity as much as possible.
Yeah.
So that would mean that this fall time goes way down, right? Because you want to minimize that number and you would have a higher jump height in high jump. If you have more energy to deal with on the down phase, you're wasting time generating muscular tension to stop your forces as opposed to pushing upwards. You still need them because that'll stretch the tendon and you get the specific conditions we talked about, but too much is probably a bad thing.
Yeah. And something interesting that we looked at was my original 50.5 inch test and then my most recent 50.5 inch test. My ground contact times, similar flight time, ground contact time went way, it decreased a lot on this most recent one. And what was interesting is a cue I told myself on this most recent test was run faster. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to look at.
Anyways, guys, that is the podcast on NRSI. Those are some of the issues with it and how you can use it. I would specifically recommend using it on things like depth jumps. I think for that, it's amazing because you're only looking at negative vertical velocity in that scenario. You're not really moving outwards. I do think we need a slightly better RSI metric for horizontal movements where you're doing an approach because I think that's probably better. The thing is this, we really only care about outcome at that point, which is jump height. So maybe the best metric is jump height. But this is good if you're going to use it in controlled settings. I still think I would pick task RSI if I were looking at Isaiah and seeing the stiffness go up by seeing his ground contact go down.
I do think you can use this to dictate where your training could go too.
Yeah,
or like even
100%.
technique, how I said like I ran faster.
Yeah.
If you notice you're more elastic and you're running, like your RSI numbers show that you're more reactive.
Do you think the NRSI or regular RSI?
Honestly, I think they're the same. What matters is the intra-rater reliability.
Right, person to person, what changes?
Yeah. So you could pick whichever one you like. I think as long as you see changes in it, it's going to give you the information.
But if you were looking at a group of people and then you did a depth jump test, NRSI is really good because it would tell you who has better.
As long as they're doing the same
qualities.
test.
Yeah,
same test
off
too.
30 centimeter and then.
I think how you explained it,
80
like it would be hard. I think problems start arising when you start comparing like a 2-footer versus a 1-footer.
Yep. Like you can't use it from a different task. You can really only use this in depth jumps, in my opinion. I think it's valid in depth jumps where task-specific RSI, I think you can use from person to person, and it'll tell you something. It gives you some idea.
Even then, it starts getting shaky because like, what if one guy, like take two 2-footers, and then they have like different approach, or they have like different, wildly different approach speeds.
That's task-specific, so you would use the eyeball test and you would mention that in your discussion.
I think you'd have to compare like guys that are like,
I think
running similar speeds.
But I think regardless, in an elite 2-foot jump, they are running the same speeds. Like it's task specific, so they're all going to be ballparked. You know, I think they would still be relatively similar. Where this corrects for it is it really does put a number to the negative vertical velocity.
I do like that this includes the penultimate step as part of the equation. What would be really interesting.
But again, you could have a shorter flight time and more horizontal velocity.
Yeah.
No, that's what I was going to say. For elite guys, it's probably all similar.
I would be really curious to play around with this and try
a new metric.
Try longer penultimate. What happens to this metric? What happens to your flight time? Try shorter penultimate. What happens to this metric?
Do you want me to tell you what I think would happen?
Yeah.
The horizontal velocity would stay the same. The fall time would go down in the penultimate step if it's short. And the RSI as a result would go, if that metric went down, they have less eccentric force.
I actually have.
People that can handle more fall time would have higher eccentric force generating capacity.
I've actually noticed something interesting.
They have to run faster, launch themselves into the shit faster, etc.
I've noticed something interesting on penultimate steps though, with elite guys specifically, is they still cover a shit ton of space.
Even with the short one?
On the short one, yeah, they just run.
Maybe
faster.
they just pause longer in the air.
Like if you look at some of Travis's best jumps, he's actually starting near where I start. But he's just, I think he's, or like Anthony Height would be a better example, is he's starting it far, but he's running really fast, and then he's like in the air for like.
Maybe what we should do is next time we'll measure the flight times of people's
For
penultimate
different-
steps,
yeah, let's do
and
it.
we'll just see what people are
I'm
at,
down.
and then we'll come to some sort of
And
conclusion.
measure flight time of the
And
jump
we'll do
too.
it live.
Measure
yeah.
flight time
Yep.
of the jump. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
I think that would be interesting. All right.
Wait,
well,
comment below what you think is gonna happen.
Yeah, because I actually don't know. We're going to
Me
find
either.
out. That's the video, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you go to THPstrength.com and sign up for coaching if you're looking to be a better athlete and jump higher. We'd love to work with you and help you out. We'll see you guys next time. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and give us 5 stars on a podcast streaming platform.
All right.
See you guys.